Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm so glad you could join us again today. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here in Southern Oregon with John L. Scott Real Estate. And today we get to interview Guy Giles of Churchill Mortgage. Guy comes on the show every month, beginning of every month, and talks to us about what's going on with mortgages, with buying in general. And he also helps interpret all these changes happening with the Federal Reserve Bank and interest rates. So we get to talk to Guy Giles today from Churchill Mortgage. It's going to be great to hear what he has to say because it's been another volatile month with mortgages, interest rates, and home buying in general. In the meantime, before we bring Guy Giles of Churchill Mortgage onto the show, let's talk briefly about what's going on locally here in Southern Oregon. So we've been watching week to week the trends in Jackson, Josephine, and Klamath counties. And I want to report that our listing inventory is becoming mixed. So here, this time last year, we have a 7% increase in Jackson County in the total number of listings. We have in Josephine County, our total number of listings have gone up 9%, but in Klamath County, they've gone down 4%. So that's kind of interesting. Our sold, which is closed, people actually got their keys in Jackson County, is down 2% from this time last year. In Josephine County, it's down 7%. And in Klamath County, our number of solds or closings are down 3%. So that's very interesting. Our inventory for listings are up a little bit, except for Klamath County. Our number of houses sold this time last year are down in all 3 counties, but check it out. The prices are up. So this is so interesting. Number of listings are up, number of solds are down. How is it our number of solds are down and the prices can go up? Well, that's the problem with pressure on the supply side. So here we are in Jackson County compared to this time last year. Prices are up 5%. Josephine County prices are up 7%. And Klamath County prices are up a whopping 9% from this time last year. So fascinating trends. Looking forward to checking back next week. But let's now get Guy Giles of Churchill Mortgage on the show so that we can talk about what's going on with mortgage rates, home buying, and just the market in general for the rest of the year. We'll take a quick break from a word from our sponsors. Please stay tuned. It's going to be a very interesting show. Well, hey there, Southern Oregon. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. So glad you could join us again. We're going to be talking to Guy Giles of Churchill Mortgage today. Welcome back to the show, Guy.
Hey, thanks. It's good to be back, and hopefully everybody can hear me a little better. I finally upgraded my little radio here, my microphone. So
yeah, it sounds great. And we wait all month for you to come back and tell us what's going on with that weird world of lending. So where do we want to start today?
Wow. Well, we are going to have a Fed. It looks like the consensus is that they're going to raise rates about 3/4 of a point again at their next meeting. So that'll be, a little bit later in this month. But unlike the old days when, like Alan Greenspan's, it just kind of depended on the size of his briefcase, what was gonna happen. And you didn't really know until that day. Now we're kind of getting a heads up, and I've been trying to get my head wrapped around, is that a good idea or a bad idea? But instead of having such volatile shifts when the Fed actually does make a decision, I don't think it's all that bad of a thing. And it looks like it's probably going to be 3/4 of a point. So, or 3/4%. Basically, that is going to affect your credit cards. If you get a home equity line of credit, it will affect that sort of thing. So, just be mindful if you have that kind of thing floating out there and there's some way to get some of that debt paid off, it might not be a bad time to think about it, because the Fed's trying to fight inflation, and actually they're finally at a point where they're doing a decent job, where they've really recognized that it is an issue, and they're raising the rates accordingly. But that, that's something that we should expect in the next, couple weeks here, is another big jump in that. Shouldn't really affect our home loan rates. I say that, but that's just because they've already been affected. Our people buy, we're basically investing in 30 years. So we already have that baked in by the time the Fed raises rates. So I'm sure next time we'll be talking, you'll say the Fed's raised their rates, and I'll say, yeah, the rates dropped just a little bit. Just because that's just kind of how the thing works.
So
We're
let's
anticipating it.
go back over that a little bit, because that is a very confusing a set of events, and it happened at the last rate increase. The last rate increase was really big too, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, they've been raising it pretty consistently at about 0.5% for for this year.
Okay,
And
so what happened last time is when the rates actually changed, or when it kicked in, the rates went down because as you just said, and if you could explain that again to people, that the market starts adjusting beforehand. Is that right? Is that
yeah,
what they're doing?
in the old days, we'd wait, and then they'd come out and speak, and we really didn't know for sure. We had an idea what they might do, but we never really knew until that day. Now we're getting, somebody's whispering it or whatever, but we're kind of hearing what these things are going to happen a little in advance. So especially with us, we're not, if you lock into a 30-year loan, you're stuck there until somebody refinances or sells that house. Unless it's an assumable loan that they can do. And you're just basically locked in for all of those years on how much interest you're going to get. So in an inflationary environment, all of a sudden your money that you're getting for interest doesn't mean as much, because, well, it's just getting eaten up in other ways. So we just really try to look ahead, see what's going to happen. And I say I'm not a guy that invests in the mortgage-backed securities, but the guys and gals that are really watching this stuff will understand that, over 30 years, that's really going to erode your income. So we've already got that kind of out there where they're just playing a little bit more of the safe bet. So the rates had already kind of gone up, and we've been getting a little bit of a reprieve when they actually raise the rates on that day. So,
well, it just kind of messes with all of our expectations for timelines. But like you said, there may be an advantage to this newer way of leaking what's going to happen ahead of time. And do you think they're doing that so that the markets will just adjust and get it over with? Is that why they're doing it?
I'm thinking, but the part of me that struggles with it is that it actually kind of makes sense, and nothing they've done makes any sense for now. So that's the only part that's throwing me off a little bit. But it's been kind of a welcome thing, because we kind of know what's going to happen going into it. So it's not hold your breath until the Fed meets and then surprise, and then everybody just goes crazy. It's a little bit of a heads up. So it feels like it's smoothing it out a little bit. Some other people may disagree, but for me, it just kind of feels like it's, even though rates are up probably 3%, well, not probably, they're basically up 3% in the last 12 months rate-wise from where they were a year ago. But I don't know if we have time in this segment or the next one, but I actually ran some math before the show just to kind of illustrate that it's probably still not a bad time to buy. I don't anticipate going forward that we're going to have the appreciation that we've had for a little while, but it's basically been unhealthy at that level. I mean, July till July, we were up 15.8% from last year.
Wow.
So I kind of rounded the numbers a little bit, and a $400,000 purchase price, if we stayed at that $400,000, just wild guess, it's high what that house would be worth if it kept up at that rate for the next 30 years while you had that mortgage. Just $34 million is the answer.
Wow.
And that seems a little steep. I don't think that my wages are going to
and that's kind of a concern, wages is if the Fed doesn't get this under control, what will the housing market look like next year?
Oh, well, as far as CoreLogic, which I think that's one of the more reliable ways to, the ones that just track this, and that's really, they're just into data, and that's what they do. analytics. They're thinking that it's going to be just under 4% for next year. So about maybe 3.8% for next year. Looks like the numbers for last month, the houses went down just a tiny bit for the first time in a long, long time. But overall, I think that probably around 4% for next year is what they're going to appreciate. And if you look at it, even with rates at 6.5%, which is a little higher than they are right now, but I just went a little uglier. At the end of your 30 years, you will have paid about $592,000 for that house, just $400,000, 20% down. You would have paid about $592,000, but with the houses going up way lower than what we're talking about, even at 4%, you're looking at a $1.3 million house at the end of that. So it's still not a bad time to buy. I mean,
no, that's incredible.
Yeah, if you just look at the numbers, and so some other things that I ran was, if you were to find a house right now for $1,700 a month, at 6.5% rate, at a $400,000 purchase price with 20% down, your payment's going to end up being probably just a little under $2,400. I had to guess on taxes and insurance a little bit.
Right.
And say you're just sitting in your house right now at $1,700 a month, which would probably be a really good deal for an actual house, renting one. Just based on where rents have gone, say in the past 30 years, where they would be, you'd be paying $6,300 a month 30 years from now for that house. And I know these were weird, and I'm just kind of a numbers guy, and I broke it down into 10 years and different things, because people are probably not in it that long. But you're just assuming, if you're not getting into the market right now, that your rent's going to still be $1,700, 30 years from now. You're actually a little bit more buffered from this. Your taxes and insurance are going to go up a little bit, but if you buy a house, that's a better hedge against inflation than being at the mercy of a landlord that's going to raise your rent up.
Yeah, even though Oregon has rent control, I believe we're still the only state in the union that has statewide rent control. You can raise the rent 7%.
Yeah, and
plus cost of living, so it can go up to 10.
Yeah, and the numbers that I figured, I did this kind of first thing this morning, were way under that. As far I think I went 6% as far as that, because I think the national average has been 8% tracking since like 1940
for rent increase.
Yes, yeah, but
really, so 8% a year is the average.
Yeah, and it's not something that I generally track. I mean, if you look, the average 2-bedroom was $25 in 1940 was the numbers that I saw.
Wow.
So it goes up a little bit, either way. Let's just say it got half of what I was talking about, and only ended up being $33,150. You're still a lot better off being in your own house and having $400,000 compounding. It just makes more sense.
And you're not even putting in the tax deductions yet. After you've owned your property for a year, then you get to start writing off your interest and
absolutely
improvements and things like that. So and
if you have less than 20% down, you should be able to write off your mortgage insurance also. So there are some definite benefits to doing that. Yeah, you have to buy a lawnmower, but at least you're your own lawn at that point.
You should ask your friends and family for Christmas. That's what they should do for you. Buy you a lawnmower.
It was pretty amazing after my daughter bought her house, how her Christmas wish list changed to, spoons and towels and things like that.
Yeah.
Whatever fun horse stuff she was into. But, I mean, you at the end of the day, you don't want to go into a house over your head. That's not fun. I have been there in the past, but if you really look at the numbers and you can make it work, you're able to get gift funds from family members. There's different ways that you can come up, with a down payment. And who knows? Maybe your parents just have it sitting in a bank right now where they're getting 0.02% interest on it, or, might not be a bad investment to just think about gift funds for down payments or different things like that. So there's another strategy or two that we can talk about after the break.
Yeah, that would be good. And also how people maybe come together in a small group to do a purchase, how that works on a loan. That would be fun to talk about in our next segment for sure.
Sounds good.
So you mentioned assumable loans. That was big decades ago. Do you see that coming back? We only have about 30 seconds, but
are
those around anymore?
I don't see. I mean, it really just depends on the loan and the investor as far as whether it will be or won't be. Generally VA loans are assumable. I don't necessarily recommend you let somebody assume your VA loan, because that's going to be your guarantee that's tied up in that house. So that could stop your ability from buying another house.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not that you couldn't buy another house. It just depends on how much of your guarantee is wrapped up in that one that you're letting somebody else assume. So it looks really attractive for selling your house, but at the same time, you could actually get burnt as the buyer.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We're going to have to take a quick break. We're talking to Guy Giles, Churchill Mortgage. Guy Giles, the numbers guy. That's what we're going to call you. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Don't go away. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here in Southern Oregon with John L. Scott Real Estate, and we're having our regular monthly update with Guy Giles, the numbers guy from Churchill Mortgage. And we've had a lot happen in the last 30 days. The market has been going up and down. How are your buyers dealing with all this volatility?
Well, half of them are getting out at the inspection period is what it feels like the last couple of days. Yeah, last week was kind of rough with people just kind of backing out. I don't know if it's cold feet or there was really a lot of issues, with these houses that they were looking at. But we've definitely had some fall out of escrow. So some other people are feeling like things have settled down enough to where they're getting more comfortable making offers. So it is a little bit of a mix as far as that goes.
Interesting.
I think mortgage applications are down about 24%. I didn't write these numbers down this morning from what I was looking at, but so it is down substantially as far as that goes from last year. But we're still putting some deals in, but it kind of feels like every other week right now, we're either getting a lot of referrals or we're not. So I'm just kind of been around long enough to learn to just enjoy the rest when you can get it. So I'm not complaining yet.
Well, and people still want to own homes, and they still want bigger or smaller or a rental. So as bumpy as it is out there, I think you and I both agree it's still a good time to buy, in part for the reasons we talked about in the last segment, just running the numbers on what it does to your financial life.
If you just look at the math, I mean, that's how it's the same math that the banks basically use to make money off of us by loaning it out. And I mean, they make most of their money up front, hoping that you'll buy another house, you'll downsize, you'll get a bigger one. But really, if you're playing the long game, even at 3%, this thing's compounding. So it's not 3% on that from earlier in the radio show. It's not 3% on that $400,000 or 4%. Now it's that same percent on $419,000, and then the next year you add another $20,000 to that, and over the years your investment is compounding at a whole lot. It's just a bigger investment doing that. So as like with a bank loan, you're paying a little bit less interest every month as you go through the loan. With your house, you have something that's going up in value. That's, it's going off that start number at the beginning of the year. So it actually, the math does make sense.
Yeah, it really does. And I counsel a lot of first-time home buyers that it's always hard when you buy a house, right? Remember when you bought your first house and you just didn't know if you'd be able to make that payment every month, and your lender knew you could because you qualified, but it's that feeling, in the beginning of, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? And then 2 or 3 years later, after you've started doing the tax deductions and the market goes up, it really helps your wealth building for your life. It's amazing what real estate can do.
I was scared to death. I mean, I really, really was. And that was, God, it's been 25 years ago, I guess, when I bought my first house, and I still have it. It's a rental now. And it in the long run, it's absolutely a good way to build wealth. I mean, you have to be diverse in it. You're going to invest a little bit in your 401k, maybe some precious metals, guns right now, who knows?
We're not giving advice outside of real estate. We're just talking. Right.
Yeah, but as an overall, I think that my housing has been my best investment overall.
Mm-hmm. And when you bought your house, what was the financial environment like? Like, what year was that first house?
It was 1998.
Okay, so interest rates?
Yeah. Man, I was drinking beer back then. I don't remember what my rate was, to be honest with you.
But it wasn't 3%.
No, gosh, no.
No.
It was, I'm sure it was over 6%, 6.5%.
Right. And that used to be considered a pretty good loan interest rate.
Historically, an awesome rate has been 6% or under.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been really spoiled, and that kind of dovetails into the other thing that I was gonna talk about was maybe, instead of, if you have your listing right now and you're thinking, man, I'm not getting anybody talking about it, or no offers, instead of dropping that thing down $70,000, maybe you look at paying $10,000-$15,000 toward the buyer's closing costs, and he or she gets to buy their rate down. I did a little bit of math on that today. By the way, on a conforming loan, you can go up to, if you have 25% down, the seller can contribute up to 9%. Just anywhere from 2%
Wow.
on an investment property. If you have more than 90%, you're allowed to go 3%, 75 to 90. Anyway, it's a little bit of a sliding scale, but you can always count on 3%. And say you're doing a $500,000 loan, 3%, that's $15,000. That'll end up buying your rate down about 1.25 right now. So even though our rates are up about 3% over the year, which is substantial, you can cut that in about half by just having the sellers pay some closing costs. The seller makes out like a bandit because they didn't have to reduce the house by $70,000. The buyer thinks it's the good old days, and they're getting, a better rate that they would have gotten a little while back. And you're saving $350 a month.
Yeah, it's an excellent suggestion. And I'm just starting to see listings that have that in there, that the seller will contribute to a buying down of the buyer's rate. Yeah, it's a great strategy. Good idea.
And if somebody just wants to come in and talk about it, I'm happy to just kind of go over it, because it really does make sense. I've actually done the math all the way down to buying, paying $30,000-$40,000 of it just for fun, because when I got into business, I thought, who in the world would pay 7 points or percent? Whenever we're talking points, you can take the word points out, put the word percent in there, and you're talking about the same thing. So believe it or not, there's a time when that breaks even and you end up way ahead with whatever. So it's going to become a individual decision. How long am I going to be in my house? I'm not a guy that thinks it's a good idea to spend more money than maybe 7 years worth, just meaning if you're saving $100 a month and it takes you 7 years to pay that back, you really want any points to pay themselves back in a reasonable amount of time, because you don't want to be hostage to a house. Just thinking it's going to take me 5 years before I break even on the money that I spent to buy down my rate. But if the seller's paying for it, it might not be a bad strategy. And again, you're just going to get a lower rate out of the thing.
But it's interesting, the side effect of all these rate increases, because wasn't the Fed trying to slow down the house appreciation that we were all enjoying? I mean, isn't that how this all started?
Yeah, well, I mean,
They didn't want us to keep making so much money.
their primary function is to keep inflation under control. Their target, 2%. And we're a little higher than that maybe at the moment. I think they waited a little too long to do it. Literally only three of the Feds have actually held a regular job like you and I hold. So
right.
These guys are appointees. You know what? I shouldn't say too much.
But you're saying they're not business people. Is that what
Correct.
You're saying? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, it's like a police officer. If you take an 18-year-old and turn him or her into a police officer, they don't have life experience. And I think it would be nice if the Fed had a little bit more life experience than just.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean, they just have a little bit on their shoulders as far as the decisions they make. So it feels to me, but that's just sadly what we're dealing with. The good news is they have finally realized that this is a big enough deal that it's not what they call transitory, that it's just going to be, a couple of months or a couple of weeks and it's going to be over. They're out of denial on that piece of it, and they're raising rates, and it'll hurt a little bit for a minute, but overall it's what really needed to happen to just kind of cool things down.
Yeah, well, and it seems to be working. Going back to what you said earlier about buyers changing their mind in the middle of the transaction and terminating, you said inspection period. So there are a lot of people that are canceling their transactions and then going back on market. My question to you is, how quickly are those same buyers going back into contract? Do you have a sense, like are they going back in on something else right away, or are they sitting out for a while?
To be honest, I haven't had a lot of that happening until about a week and a half ago.
Okay, so that's real new.
Yeah, and it's not to say that it wasn't, because once people get a little bit frightened, they're a little bit frightened, and it's just it's just what it is. Right now, they're not feeling, or to me, they don't seem as frightened as they were, a month and a half ago. So it does feel to me like things are, starting to kind of come back. But I think some of the people that were initially scared are maybe getting out. So I really haven't had them come back with another house. I had 4 drop out in about 5 days, and they haven't found a house yet. But I don't think any of them have just said, we're just going to wait. I think that there are some opportunities right now for buyers to maybe get a deal, and it's the first time in a while. I think I would much rather go in at a realistic price and maybe ask somebody to pay a little bit of my closing costs to buy down my rate than have to go into a bidding war over a house that you're going to take years to appreciate into whatever you just went over. And then you're just crossing your fingers, hoping that the appraisal comes in. There are just a lot of variables in that market that I think are scarier than a little bit of a rate increase.
Yeah, up markets, a seller's market has a whole nother set of problems, and people were overpaying left and right last year and the year before. And so, but that's not the market we have now. It's more even.
Yeah. And if that was you that ended up buying, then don't feel bad, because overall, if you're not selling, you haven't lost anything, and they will go up, even.
Well, and also they got a house. That's the other thing.
That's true. And that's, there's not as many of those around here as there really needs to be anyway. So, like that first house that I bought, I had it through the big crash. And I remember calling my insurance company, asking them, why are you raising up my insurance rates? I haven't had a claim, and my house is worth half of what it was. Well, even though it took it went up and then it went way down, it's still up a lot from then. And that was the biggest crash since the Depression that happened in 2009. And so it is a long game. And, I still think it's a good time if it fits into your budget to buy.
Yep, I agree. We're going to have to take another quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about how a lot of us are hearing that there's a big crash coming, but most of us just don't see that. And we want to talk about the numbers why. So we're talking to Guy Giles, the numbers guy from Churchill Mortgage. We just named him today. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors, one of which is Churchill Mortgage. Very grateful. Thank you. Also, John L. Scott, Ashland, Medford, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. Alice Lema here, broker John L. Scott in Southern Oregon, getting our regular monthly update with Guy Giles, the numbers guy from Churchill Mortgage. Thanks for coming back, Guy.
Well, hey, I'm glad to be here. Just right in the middle of all this craziness,
Yeah, well, it helps a lot. The guidance you give us every month is really helpful and calming and educational, and that's what we're here for. So before the break, we wanted to talk about if this slowing down of the housing market is going to be a crash or not, because we've got some people thinking it's going to get really messy out there. What do you think?
Well, for me, I don't see that happening again, especially like it happened before, because just none of those variables, other than a lot of appreciation, are the same. And what I mean by that is, my industry was writing terrible loans at that point. Everybody was just at a race to sell as many houses as they could. We had a whole lot more investors that were in what were called option arm or negative amortization loans back then. And if you had a pulse and a 680 credit score, you could buy a house without documenting any income or assets. And people were doing that, and they were buying houses, and everybody was under the impression that everything was going to go up forever. And it was really ugly, but mostly there were a lot of very poor loans being written back then, and that has not been the case. I think we haven't really loosened up much at all.
Yeah, it kind of permanently changed, didn't it, after that?
It really did. We do have some loans that are kind of no income, no asset ones, but it's only for basically investment properties that really do pencil out, and the investors thinking, well, even if they default on this loan, we have a good asset and we're going to be able to make rent on the thing, and it's just not a bad deal. So that's the only weird one. And there are probably some investors using that loan a lot, but for the most part, we're all doing fully documented loans. They're getting a little creative in that. For some of the investment properties, they're looking at going back to 40-year loans where there's an interest only period for 10 years. And then just because they have literally been priced out of the market. An interest only loan isn't the end of the world, because you're mostly paying interest on those upfront years anyway.
Well, and there's people that can benefit from that. They're usually more temporary, but yeah.
And I can get creative, but I try to stay a little bit more in the traditional bucket. But it goes into a fixed rate loan after that first 10-year interest only loan. So it's not even like you're going to be subject to wherever the markets are at that point. What you're getting into in the beginning. And as we said before, rents will go up. So I'm not necessarily saying that you should go into a 40-year loan. I mean, you're going to pay a lot more interest doing that, but it's an option. But that's about as creative as we're getting right now. Other than that, we're just doing really traditional, just traditional loans where we're
as an
documenting
industry,
your income and asset. And there are some bank statement loans out there for what we call the non-QM market, where we're just looking at bank deposits rather than your whole tax returns, because for real self-employed people, you do understand that you might write a lot off and that you still could afford a house. So there's a little bit of stuff, but what crashed us before, we don't have any of that, and we haven't had any of that going on for over 10 years.
Well, and also, wasn't there like an unemployment issue back during the crash that really kind of spiraled everything downward more quickly that we just don't have right now?
Well, we don't have the unemployment, but to be fair, it's because the clowns that record that, if you have 2 part-time jobs to make up for that full-time job you might have had before, that counts as 2 jobs. So it's
oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're in great shape. One thing that's coming up that'll probably be pretty good is, not to get political, conservatives will probably
We're
take
not,
over.
we're not a political show.
I know, but it's a reality, and it does affect this. The Republicans will probably take over the House and the Senate. Then you have gridlock. Then you can't have any big policy moves one way or another. So you have a president that's on one side, House and a Senate that's on the other. You don't have either one of them going in one huge direction. So markets typically like that. So that actually, yeah, I mean, it's just about what the government can and can't do. And, it is what it is if you're on the left or the right. But when you have gridlock like that, then nobody can do anything too stupid.
Well,
So,
that'll be an interesting phenomena if that happens. Then the markets might relax and stabilize just because they're not afraid of any more sweeping changes. Is that what you're saying?
yes, it's
Wow, very
what
cool.
I'm saying. So, and again, that's not to go political left or right. I'm pretty anti all of them. So, it just is what it is.
Well,
but we're here for the people, the regular people that need a house to be in, and and that could settle things down a little bit after the midterm elections. You just don't want anything going too far, either way. But we're still digging out of a hole of a big fire a couple of years ago too. So, it's one of those things that, our housing from 1991 has gone up 514% here in Oregon.
wow.
It's pretty insane. And, and obviously we have Roseburg and then higher markets like Portland. So it's all a mix for the whole state. But down here in our little section, we still don't have the housing that we need to even replace the housing that we had. And that's not factoring in any other people moving in. So, anyway, at the end of the day, I think it's still going to be a strong market around here. And I don't see any kind of a crash, definitely not coming from our side of things this time.
Not a housing crash.
No, and something maybe a little bit more healthy in the way of appreciation would be a welcome thing. But, I don't know, just get in, talk to your lender. Hopefully it's me. Hopefully you'll go see Alice when it's time to buy a house. But, just talk to us, and we're really willing to sit down and have a conversation with you. No pressure to use either of us, but, come in and talk, because it's not as scary as everybody thinks it is out there right now.
Well, and we're tracking these micro movements, you and I, week to week, and then we talk on the show every month. And that helps the folks that are out there buying and selling understand the little trends that can lead into a bigger trend, so you can make a more informed decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super important. So different economic conditions than the housing crisis we had in 09, 07, depending on what your finances, where you got hit first. So we're not really looking at that much loss of our home values. We're just not.
No, I don't see it at all. I think some foreclosures, I've read something the other day that some of them are ticking up a little bit, but
it's so small though. It's like 1 in 2.
Yeah, it's really weird, and especially with all the equity that people have. It seems really weird to me.
They just sell their house and then they don't lose it.
It makes a lot more sense for sure.
Well, Guy, if somebody wants to talk to you, what's your phone number? We're going to have to wrap it up here.
Yeah, it's 541-944-6987.
Awesome. So give Guy Giles a call, the numbers guy from Churchill Mortgage. Also want to have you start tuning in to listen to the show at 99.5 FM. KCMX is changing some things up. So the 880 station will be dissolving in January. Have a great weekend, everybody.